Hey everybody, this is Dan, and today I want to talk about monopolies. And before we move away from Carnegie and Rockefeller, I want to talk about some different types of monopolies that were occurring at the time. Monopoly itself means one, right? That's the mono part. So monopoly means control of the market by one seller, and I think most of you already know that. But not all monopolies are created equal. Andrew Carnegie's motto was, cut prices, scoop the market, run the mills at full. That is, to set prices low enough to undercut his competitors and always run his plants at full capacity so that he could maximize his capital investment and produce the highest possible return. Carnegie took every opportunity to cut costs to drive his rivals out of business. Think about this. In 1864, steel rails sold for about $126 per ton. By 1875, Carnegie was selling them for $69 per ton, and eventually pricing was less than $20 per ton in the late 1890s. By then, the United States led the world in steel production. Carnegie steel plants stood at one end of a long chain of operations that he either owned outright or controlled through partnerships, from iron ore mines to ships that transported iron ore across the Great Lakes, railway lines, coal mines, ovens that produced coke for steel manufacturing, and plants for turning iron ore into iron and steel. Bring together all of these operations under one roof, and this idea of controlling that entire supply chain is known as vertical integration. And just think of it as a vertical line of supply. And at the time, it was something new to American business. Carnegie controlled all aspects and transportation of raw materials, which guaranteed a reliable flow of crucial supplies at predictable prices, and also denied his competitors raw materials and favorable prices at the same time. In 1901, Carnegie sold his company to J.P. Morgan, who then combined Carnegie's operations with other steel companies that he had invested in, creating United States Steel, which was the country's first corporation that was capitalized at more than $1 billion. Now, by the way, in case you're curious, Morgan paid Carnegie $480 million for Carnegie Steel back in the day, which would be about $13 billion in today's dollars. To put this in comparison, Bill Gates' net worth is about $79 billion, and Mark Zuckerberg's worth is about $35 billion. The market cap of Facebook, for example, is $264 billion. And in today's dollars, Carnegie Steel would have a market cap of about $40 billion. So, by comparison, Facebook is many times more valuable than U.S. Steel ever was as far as market capitalization goes. So think about this if you're ever deciding whether you should get into technology versus heavy manufacturing moving forward. Carnegie's company was larger and more complex than any other manufacturing enterprise in pre-Civil War America, but it was by no means unique in the late 19th century. While Carnegie was one of the first to master vertical integration by controlling all aspects of supply, transport, and manufacturing, Rockefeller and Standard Oil mastered, at least initially, what we call horizontal integration, which is probably closer to most of the antitrust legislation, or actually antitrust situations that occur today. As you know, Rockefeller started with just one refinery in Cleveland, but eventually he controlled about 40 oil refineries, and at the time, that was 90% of the refining capacity in the United States. So Rockefeller monopolized one step in the manufacturing process, and that idea of monopolizing one step in the process is what we call horizontal integration as opposed to vertical. Compare this to today's corporations. If Verizon, for example, tried to buy AT&T, or if Time Warner Cable would attempt to buy Comcast, they would have control of one aspect of communications, which would limit competition and drive prices upward. It probably wouldn't be allowed. The Sherman Act of 1890 was the first federal antitrust law, and it was actually passed in response to Standard Oil's control, but I'm getting ahead of myself. By the 1880s, Standard Oil moved to a vertical integration model like Carnegie's by also gaining control of oil fields, building its own transportation facilities, including pipelines, ocean-going tanker ships, and created its own marketing operations. By about 1890, Standard Oil had achieved virtually complete vertical and horizontal integration of the American petroleum industry, something unknown to American business at the time. Rockefeller eventually set up a holding company or trust, Standard Oil of New Jersey. And at the time, New Jersey state laws allowed for corporations to own stock in other corporations, which was the perfect environment for setting up a new kind of business entity which could control the entire market. Standard Oil built new efficient refineries, taking advantage of economies of scale and efficiencies, and really controlled the U.S. petroleum market up until the first decades of the 1900s. It was eventually broken up in 1911. But remnants of that company are still around. Standard Oil of New Jersey eventually became Exxon, who I think most of us are familiar with today. So there you have it, two types of classic monopolies in the late 1800s. Carnegie's vertical integration by controlling all aspects of supply, transport, and manufacturing, and Rockefeller's horizontal integration, which locked up one part of the supply chain in refining. In modern economics, we speak of natural monopolies where costs of production are minimized by having a single company produce a product. And probably the best example of this is public utilities or electric companies. They are basically natural monopolies with capitalization need that's cost prohibitive for just anyone to set up. There are also technological monopolies, such as maybe Microsoft with the Windows operating system. But typically technological monopolies don't last. Microsoft did not come to control the marketplace by vertical or horizontal integration that forced others out of business. They did it by producing a product that was widely adopted and with some help of patent protection. Other technological monopolies may have been, actually there was a bicycle wheel manufacturer in Toledo who controlled the market for a long time. But as the country moved away from spoked wheels into the automobile, they went out of business. So there's an example of how a technological monopoly never lasts. And that'll probably be the case with Microsoft as well. But I digress. For now, just remember that when Carnegie and Rockefeller began to dominate critical markets in the late 1800s, antitrust laws were formed in response. And we'll talk more about antitrust and more about monopolies in the weeks to come. That's it for now. Thanks. Have a great day.
John is in the basement mixing up the medicine. I'm on the pavement thinking about the government. The man in a trench coat, badge out, laid off, says he's got a bad cough, wants to get it paid off. Look out, kid, it's something you did. God knows when, but you're doing it again. You better duck down the alleyway looking for a new friend. The man